You are the director of the Center for Economic Development and Business Research, more commonly referred to as CEDBR, at Wichita State University. He came to WSU from Georgia Southern, where he was the planning director of the Coastal Rivers Water Planning Policy Center. He leads the CEDBR in its mission to provide accurate, reliable information and analysis to inform decision-making in the public and private sectors. And I can say personally that at the City of Wichita, we've used his office a number of times for statistical analysis and return on investment and various things. So welcome, Jeremy.
That was a lot more than 3 seconds now.
I know, it's 3 minutes.
All right, so the first comment or question was asked is give it a little bit of an update of the U.S. economy, state economy, and Sedgwick County, and then get into a few other elements of this changing demographics. The first one I should bring up is what's going on in the U.S. economy. Are we growing? Are we sideways? And there's a lot of confusion. I will tell you, if you back up just a year, 2 years, last 3 years, economists had a lot more clarity in their expectations of the next 6 months. Since January, that clarity is getting fuzzier and fuzzier and fuzzier. We're rather long in the tooth for this cycle. I know some people are a little shocked, especially in Kansas, to say we're long in the tooth for a growth cycle, but we are. We have way more than 7 years now of this growth, and we're now looking to a recession. Now, that doesn't mean recessions happen in a 7-year period, but there are other conditions going into it, and there are a lot of concerns that even from data side, from other elements that are themes to the economy that start to give us some concern about what's going on. Now, the probability of a recession over the next 6 months is still pretty low. We're talking about 20%. It's been increasing since last year, which was, I think it was in single digits, but now most are saying it's around 20% or maybe a little bit more. So we're getting a little bit more to that anxiousness of what might happen. Why is that? Now we measure the economy by GDP. That's the value of everything produced. And you can see here the fourth quarter last year, first quarter, we're both under 1%. Second quarter, we're still hasn't been revised yet. It's still just barely over 1%. So we see this slowing down by the number. The values of goods and services being produced is slowing down. This is definitely the biggest concern the Federal Reserve had in July when they were looking at what they're going to do the federal funds rate. They're looking at the economy saying it's slowing down. And then they look at employment numbers. We had some really slow employment numbers at the beginning of the year, and then we dropped to almost nothing in May. We need about 150,000 jobs every single month just to keep up with natural growth. So we've just been barely keeping up, and then all of a sudden we went way under. So there's some concerns of the use of labor, how we're hiring labor. Look at business investments. Those numbers are looking a little shaky in the last several months. So you start looking forward, you have to say, can the U.S. economy continue at this steam, especially in the context of what's going on, not only politically, but you also see what's going on globally. There's some concerns of our ability to continue that strength. So I'm not suggesting there's a recession, but I'm suggesting we need to start putting a lot of caution into everything that we're looking at over the next few months. We need to be more cautious. All right, so let me put this in context. This is just by the employment, but if I looked at GDP, which I will do a lot in about a month and a half now, I'll look a lot at GDP. But if you look at the employment side, all I did was divide by every single month, January of 2014, just get a perspective over time. The ups and downs, all that is seasonality. The real trend here you see is the U.S. continued to grow, which is was at about 9% from January of 2014 to today. It's grew about 9% that total time period. And then you look at Kansas and Wichita, we grew about 5% during that entire time period. It's been pretty flat over recent months. So that means it's held our steady growth of that almost no growth in the recent months than it was in the first few months back in 2014. What does that mean? The U.S. economy is continued to grow. Kansas and Wichita are stalling out that growth. We're growing, but stalling it out. What are the reasons why? Let's look at the fundamentals for our economy. I don't have enough time to go into the details of the fundamentals. Let's talk about agriculture. Agriculture was really strong for quite a period of time, but because of prices and global conditions, the value of the dollar is just continuing to shrink that market, and we are a commodity-driven market when you look at agriculture. Depends on what the value of the dollar is how it gets sold and what the demand is. So that's pushing down the growth in the Kansas economy. Then you go to farm equipment, which we do that. That also went down because of agriculture is down globally. You look at oil and gas. I probably don't need to talk about that one, but oil and gas has really tanked our state a little bit. We get a lot of income on that side, not on the employment, but that income is then respent in retail and other services across the state, and that's where we're feeling that loss of oil and gas. And then manufacturing. The value of the dollar, we ship a lot of goods across the global economy. The value of the dollar is continuing to push that down. China and other countries also weakening our ability to exports. So it's not looking great when you look at the fundamental sectors of the state and what's happening. And why they're outpacing us, really. Any questions about the economy? All right, the next one I was asked is what is the structure of our economy and how are we influenced? And so I use an equation called L cubed. And I don't know, the line got popped up a little. That line should be right at 1. 1 means any of these 1 sectors is exactly like the share of our economy compared to the share of the U.S. economy. We look very similar. So when you look at that, construction comes close, leisure and hospitality comes pretty close, but there's one that really sticks up. And that means we're more concentrated in that. Can you guess which one that is? It's pretty obvious, right? Manufacturing. We're 2 times more concentrated in manufacturing today in 2015 than the U.S. is concentrated in manufacturing. So that gives you a little bit of a context. So although manufacturing is only 20-some% of our employment now, which keeps shrinking, it's still an important component of the structure of our economy. A lot of new goods and wealth comes through this one sector. So I thought I'd throw this in here. Kansas as well is much more concentrated in manufacturing. I threw in 2008, which was a real good year for Sedgwick County. And then you come over here to 2015, you can see that concentration is dropping. So we're losing the core sector that really feeds the rest of this economy. Not only here in Sedgwick County, but even the state has been declining a little bit in the manufacturing side of goods. Any question about the structure of the economy? Yes.
So our intent in the region has been for economic development to diversify the economy, and if that happens, one might think that a natural process would be that manufacturing might decline some, either stay the same or decline some, and other sectors would increase. Is there yet any sign of increase in other sectors, or is it just those are holding the same and manufacturing is decreasing?
Sure. So great question. So is there a shift from manufacturing to other sectors? And let me back up a little bit first. It's part of diversification conversation in the area has been away from aerospace. So you can have diversification from aerospace to other goods, and that also is diversification, right? But then you're talking about other sectors. And there has been some sectors that continue to grow. We have a lot of that management of companies. Although we keep losing some management of companies, we also have a lot of growth in some management of companies in this region that has been a new wealth creator for the entire region. That's probably the one sector that's been of value to this region when you start looking at the highest level that I'm looking at right here, where you see a trend. We actually have a diversification study that we do, or we used to provide for now the Greater Wichita Partnership, and that one goes in much more detail, not only by sector, but also even size of businesses. And you can see how that's changed over time, how much more dependent are we on a few companies that are really large versus some smaller ones. So I've got a great study that we do look at. It's about a year or 2 old, because they haven't, with the change, they haven't requested the new diversification one. So we've seen a little bit. We're seeing it mostly in that management of companies. Coke is the biggest value there. I mean, they've been creating a lot of jobs. And then you see a few in the data side, but there's not a lot of jobs replacing the jobs that are being lost on the other side. So that's the problem.
Thank you.
Jeremy,
Yes.
what is natural on the far left, especially since it's the lowest?
So natural, you should know. Natural gas and mining is where it's at. Yeah.
Okay, but would
So-
that be like our oil and gas industry?
So oil and gas is a great sector. It fits partly over in there in the natural gas. It fits partly over in utilities. It fits partly over in services.
Okay.
because you'll see them in different segments. You have people that do the piping that goes in the utilities and transportation side, where they're doing pipes going all the way out for them. You'll have service-oriented stuff. Drilling is in a different sector, is over on a service side. The natural gas and mining, that's the actual production side of it. So Sedgwick County is pretty low in that. However, you look on the service side for oil and gas, we're really high. If I broke out a subsector, we're actually pretty high in a subsector of that. We do a lot of the management of oil and gas throughout the state. We just don't do the production side as much. Yes?
Just for clarification, the line 1 is Sedgwick County in comparison to national, or did you say
The
state?
U.S., yes.
US, okay.
So if we're exactly one, we look exactly like the U.S. Share of our employment in that sector to the share of the employment there. So a great example is we're around 20-some% of our employment is in manufacturing. The U.S. is somewhere around 10%. That's why we're twice as more concentrated in that sector.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Jeremy, I have a question. Question. This is probably going to snowball, but looking at trade up there, is that exports? Is that considered?
Good question. So trade, that includes retail and wholesale trade. So you have that retail sector, and you'll see it's there's also a little bit below 1.
Okay. All right.
Wholesale trade here also includes the sale of aerospace. So that sector is a fun one to watch because it also tells us what's going on in the sale of the goods, because aerospace is very different than some of the other manufacturing products. You just see in the manufacturing product side, and they'll export it, but we also sell it basically here too.
Thank you.
All right, so let me switch it again. And here's just one quick map showing the population growth. This is by a census tract for the entire region. Now, you've probably seen lots of different maps on here, and I can go in much more detail. One of the ones I thought about after I put this together is our daytime population map and our daytime population commute to work. There's some great data that is now available where by IRS, I know where they live and where they work, and so I can see by sector and by income who's driving in and driving out. I didn't put that on here, but I can talk about it in context. So what's going on within the region? You see that flight from the urban core. This is nothing unusual for here. Matter of fact, if I controlled it for similar communities to the Midwest, you'd see the same. When you have cheap land and no physical boundaries stopping you, you keep going out. I should note, and one of the concerns that we continue to have on infrastructure is we had a big competition for property tax on houses. And so what did that do? As a region, that creates no value. People aren't moving in here because of houses, but they are moving from one place to the next, so that's creating that growth to that urban fringe, and definitely making more demand there when there's not really aggregate demand as the region. So it's just shifting it from location to location. Any questions on what's going on within the region? And I can go in a lot more detail. I just didn't want to pull up lots of maps. Yes, Pete?
You made reference to the data that you have access
Yes.
to about travel from home to work. Is that something that our WAMPO staff has? Access to?
Last month we did an update to that, and so we can send you the whole report if you would like to have the whole report and share it to anyone. It's
I think the
fun to
TAC
look at. So
could use it.
we did it for the entire state. So we showed how many people were driving into the state, driving out of the state, what was our overall population, how did it change over time, and then we did it down for the Wichita area. So obviously we create jobs generally. People drive in, our daytime population comes up from it.
All right, but Jeremy, I'm hearing chatter that everybody would probably be interested in seeing that.
All right, yeah,
Plus,
I'll make sure I forward it on to you guys.
Yeah, if you get it to Kathy or Kristen, then would it also show like people that drive in from outside of Sedgwick County into Sedgwick County? Do you have that? Or
So
at least-
the way we did it this last time was the whole MSA, but I think in 2012, we used 2012 data. One time we did it by county, so we showed Butler County and how Butler County, they all leave and they go somewhere, right? It's where people live, not where people work. And then you see Sedgwick County, you have all these people coming in to live here. So we can do it by any geography. You actually can break it down to a city level and say how people are moving in or moving out. It's a great data set where we can do a lot of analysis on.
We probably don't want to see how many people are driving to the casino every day.
It would be for work, right? Versus they living there.
So the format that we would receive it in, would we have the ability to sort to that city level?
So I could do it by city, and we have done it by cities. So if you want to know how many people are living and working in your community and how many people live somewhere else and work there by sector. So this is by occupation. Are they professional? Are they teacher? Are they manufacturing? Whatever. And by income. So as is a lower income to higher income. How many people are coming into your community for a job, or how many people with higher wealth are leaving your community for another job, which is fascinating stuff. It understands your dynamic of your community and how it fits within the region. And that's important when you start thinking broader perspectives. What is Butler County? What is Andover, right? I mean, there's clearly people are living there by choice, higher income, and they're working somewhere else because their jobs can't be supported there. So we're interconnected. So we could look at just Andover or most geographies.
Stuff.
Andover would be nice, yeah.
What's that?
I said Andover would be nice, yeah.
Andover, yeah. All right, so population forecast we released earlier this year, and I guess I'm already running out of time, so let me go through this a little quickly. Bigger perspective, the U.S. economy continues to slow growth. Population is by far the biggest variable in longer term growth than anything else. You need consumers, you need population to work, you need for labor. I mean, there's so many variables behind it. So our growth rate continues to slow. It's expected that the U.S. economy, not by my forecasts, but by other forecasts, is to expand by 0.8% a year each year for the next 50 years. For Kansas, we're showing half that growth. We were about half that growth before, so this is not really startling news. We're not slowing down at any rate slower than we were before. We were already going slower. If we backed up 10, 15 years ago, it was about half that of the U.S. But it's continuing to expect to grow slower and slower as we get to the end of the 50-year period that we're forecasting. But about 0.4% as an aggregate for the entire state. So when you take that, I only want to show a few. Kansas City is the fastest growing. I actually took the northeast part. That's actually growing by 0.4%. Then you come to the South Central. We have it growing by 0.1%. Now, South Central is a lot more than Sedgwick County. It is several counties, so some counties are growing faster than others. And then you get the rest of the state. Matter of fact, 85 states out of the 105 are declining in the state. The relationship, when you're talking about infrastructure and planning, the relationship, I don't think we really understand it, that pressure between the rural parts of the state and the micropolitan parts of the state. This is Hayes and Dodge and even the bigger cities. Those relationships are becoming more and more linked. The services that cannot be provided in the very rural parts are getting more extreme because there's less population, and the dependency on bigger cities are becoming greater and greater. So I only bring that up because I've done this a few times to some rural groups, and that's an important conversation to have. What is that connection? How are those relationships connected? Not only from transportation, but medical, but for retail. There's a lot more that we are not thinking about that's going to change going forward when you look at the relationships across this vast state. Big trends. First, this is not a good sign. You see youth is pretty flat in the future. Now, if you look at fertility, we actually have a higher fertility rate in Kansas than the U.S. So we can produce kids. We like having kids, but where are the kids going? Now, what we're doing is we're taking actual data from census, we're aging them and taking past trends of migration and applying to it. And what that's telling us is the youth, the Generation Y, are not finding jobs here because our market in Kansas has been pretty weak and we're a smaller geography. And they're finding jobs in other states, in other cities, right? So they're migrating out. Because they're migrating out, the kids are also not being born in the state anymore when they leave. And they're not necessarily, we have a net out migration, so we don't have that in-migration coming back from that cohort. So that makes that age cohort flat going forward. However, you see the retired population continuing to go forward. There's several variables to this. One variable, and if you had this, I have videos for them. If you want to go to our website, there's some great videos. They're getting older, and we have them disco ball partying here, dancing on our video. So they're getting older, and they're not dying because of health reasons, right? Health is a big factor to what's going on. Now, one of the things that we don't do is we didn't make any other assumptions. We just held everything constant and just fast forward the clock every year to see what would happen. there's a difference between the older generation now who is retiring and the generation that is just starting to retire. Their preferences are changing. And there's one core variable that in that preference that I think is very concerning to the state. That variable is the baby boom generation love their kids, and they will move to wherever their kids will go. So if their kids are leaving, I do have concerns that that generation could have a flight from the state. And I'm not calculating it in here. We're taking longer trends, so we may overestimate this age cohort, which is very likely from the survey data. They're going to stay with their kids. They want to be near their grandkids. So that's a problem. All right, here's just the over 65 population forecast. Obviously, this is the importance of the central city in providing healthcare services. I put that on here because that's one of those dynamics. There are people in western Kansas who want to stay on the farm but can't because of medical reasons. So they choose to live here by a second choice. They want the healthcare services in this region because they want to stay close to the farm and family that's going on. Right? So the demand and healthcare component is an important thing to think about when we go forward into time. Generally, I'll say, okay, I'm way over time. We have a limited labor supply, that population growth. That's going to limit our potential growth going forward. We have this interdependence going on from different geographies, different municipalities, and I don't think we really understand how interdependent we are on each other going forward. And that's not just surrounding counties. This is much further beyond that. So we need to start planning for that. And I only put on here is tax structures today might not fit the demand for services. If you have an aging population, what's going on? If we have a smaller working age population, we have all these older people, and we're based on income, that's going to affect the source of funding for other government services going forward. I won't do this. This is a funny story with the movie Big, but I won't go through that. Anyway, any questions?
Any questions for Jeremy? Jeremy, this was fascinating information. I know you feel like you went over time, but the audience was paying attention.
Well, good.
It's good stuff. Really good stuff.
If you ever want any other detail, I mean, break any slice out in more detail if you wanted to geek out with me a little further.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.